good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is September 13th, in the year of our Lord, 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you, and we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade men of the truth, or folks of the truth. I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios in the beautiful, overcast, partly rainy central Susquehanna Valley in the Great Keystone State. We're finally getting some of that rain off of Hurricane Irma, but we're not supposed to get a lot here. Most of the rain's actually moving off to our east as it's going up through there. And I guess the next named storm is Jose. And I don't know. They're predicting it's not going to make landfall, but we'll see. I don't know. I haven't really watched the news yet this morning. I had my aqua therapy this morning. That went well. And I had to stop at the store while I was in town, so we didn't do double trips to get some cat food and some other things. So I didn't have a chance to watch the news. I've been up here doing show prep most of the morning. I titled my show today, and you might think that this is an odd title for a show, but it's Beware the Ethical Humanist. And just to give you a little flavor where the show's going to go today, the ethical humanists are the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. Now let that sink in a little bit as we get the show started. This was actually precipitated by some of the comments on Facebook for my Facebook antagonist, Kimberly Eaton, talking about a Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who was nominated by President Trump to fill a seat on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And because of her religious convictions, the ethical humanists out on Facebook and elsewhere are up in arms about this. And it's really funny how ethical humanists decry somebody that lives by objective moral standards and principles when they themselves do not. Ethical humanists do not have a subjective or a objective set of morals or principles or core values. They're all subjective. And we're going to go over that this morning. I got a little thing here. We're just going to talk about the 12 core principles as this one person sees them. And as we read down through just the principles, I won't comment too much on them. Of course, you know, that's subject to change. You'll see how subjective they really are. And that's why I'm against just about everything ethical humanists do as far as their philosophy. Now, they do some good things. There are a lot of people out there that I don't agree with philosophically, character-wise, moral-wise, or anything, but for some reason they end up doing some good things. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, you know, you got to give them credit where credit's due and, you know, criticize them where criticism's due. But it's been my experience dealing with, and Kimberly isn't the only one. I deal with other ones on social media that I haven't talked about. I've gotten a discussion on boards. I've watched YouTube videos where these people are calling themselves a humanist or ethical humanist, or, you know, they go by a bunch of different names, but they're still humanist. The basic philosophy that they carry is in humanism, that they believe humans are the highest order, and that's it. There's nothing above humans. There's no God. There's no deity. There's no flying spaghetti monster, as some of them would like to say, above man. Man is the pinnacle of evolution. And because we disagree with that, I disagree with that wholeheartedly, I am taken to task about that. Plus, and get this, and I know that my buddy Dave listens to the show almost faithfully every day. If not, I believe it's faithful. I think he listens to every episode, whether it's live or in Memorex. However, I think he would agree with me that I've never forced my religion on anybody. I've never sat here on this show and talked to anybody or made comments on articles to make anybody think that if you don't do it God's way, then, you know, I'm going to come over there and put you in a headlock and give you a noogie until you surrender to God's will. I've never done that. I put the case for God, and I've always done this, the case for Jesus Christ and salvation. out there, biblically correct. What the Bible says, I add nothing to it. I take nothing away. In other words, I leave nothing out. And I explain to people exactly what Christianity is, who God is, and about His Word, His inerrant Word. And I leave them to decide for themselves. But there's ethical humanists out there that say, since I preach this on the open air for people to hear, and that I want people to follow a objective standard in life, objective morality in life, that I'm forcing my religion on folks. Folks, it's one thing to follow commandments like thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not envy, honor your father and mother, put no gods before me. But let's leave that no gods before me. Let's go to the rest of it. Thou shalt not murder, steal, covet, bear false witness, all those kind of things. There are a lot of people out there that are not Christians, that are not religious, that believe wholeheartedly in those objective standards laid out in the Ten Commandments. And yet, they're not Christian. They're not religious. But they do believe in the sanctity of life. They do believe that murder is wrong. There are people out there that aren't religious that believe abortion is wrong. And yet, it's told of me because I preach this, because I believe this, because I use certain principles in my life and use certain standards, like my Christian faith informs the rest of my life. I don't see anything wrong with that, and I've never heard anybody but humanists tell me that that's wrong, because I'm trying to bind my morality on people. Well, guess what, folks? Whether you like it or not, godly morality has infiltrated almost every civilization in the world. We didn't suck morality out of our thumbs, folks. It just wasn't something somebody sat there one day and said, aha, this is what should be moral and this is what we should do. And the thing with ethical humanists, or humanists in general, that's really funny, and we'll get into this, and I don't want to give too much away here, is their reasonings behind why I'm wrong about morality. And I'm like, okay. And hopefully, by the time we get done with the show, hopefully you'll see that, it's not that I'm right and they're wrong. I want you to sit down and think about this rationally yourselves, but not be so rational that you throw out objectivity and supplant that with subjectivity. Too many times people reason themselves out of good things because of their feelings. I don't feel that it's this way. I don't feel that this is correct, or it doesn't make me feel good, so I'm not going to do it. And those feelings are very subjective, and a lot of times they depend on, for me, sometimes they depend on the time of day because of my medical condition. Sometimes I get into a funk. I don't think I go into a total depression, but sometimes I get into a funk, and if you ask me while I'm in a funk a certain question, I might give you a different answer while I'm in that funk because of what I'm feeling at the time. It may not be the right one, but it may be a different answer than what I might give some other time. And I have to recognize that in my life and make sure that I'm being consistent in my life, whether I'm in a funk or not. Okay? But folks, this is a very important show to me. Beware the ethical humanists. I am writing a rebuttal to a letter to the editor in the Daily Item that was talking about the Ethical Humanist Society here in the Central Susquehanna Valley, or in the Susquehanna Valley here. And I read that article and I started studying what humanism is, what ethical secular humanism is, and I'm appalled. I am appalled. And folks, everywhere that this ideology has been applied has gone wrong. Everywhere. Because ethical or secular humanism, whether it's ethical or not, secular humanism is part and parcel to socialism. It really is. And we'll like I said, we get there and we'll go to that real quick. Look, folks, I use Bluehost for the DanClementShow.com show notes page. Very easy to set up, very easy cPanel to use. Even if you've never used a cPanel, they have tutorials to walk you through this. The hosting is very inexpensive. Right now they have a sale going on at $2.95 a month to get started. You get live support, 24/7 support. You get free domain. You get free site builders. And you get one-click WordPress install, which is fantastic. WordPress plugins are like the best that I've ever seen as far as plugins. And I used to be my own webmaster when I had the Constitutional Warrior website up, using that as my show notes page and everything. And I was using a CCS program called Joomla. And it took a little bit of learning, and I couldn't go back to it now. I'd have to sit there and relearn everything, because it's one of those things you have to keep doing in order to keep up with it. Not so with Bluehost. You could be your own webmaster. You don't have to keep up with anything. They do the bulk of the work for you, and it's a fantastic looking website. I'm still tweaking it to make it look even better with the theme that I'm using. But folks, if you want to start a web presence like I did with the DanClementShow.com, please go to the DanClementShow.com and click on the Bluehost widget at the top of the show notes page there. And it'll take you into the Blue hosting portal, and you can get all set up. And I make a little bit of money, and you're helping me support the show by doing that. And we're both going to have a fantastic experience while we're doing both of these things. Today's daily Bible verse, or Bible reading, actually has a lot to do with what I'm going to talk about on the show today. Acts chapter 5, verses 26 through 29. And this is where Peter and the other apostles are drugged before the Sanhedrin. Then the captain went with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should be stoned. And when they had brought them, they sent them before the council, the Sanhedrin, in other words, folks. And the high priest asked him, saying, "Did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood on us." But Peter and the other apostles answered and said, "We ought to obey God rather than man." There's a principle, there's a Christian principle there that I live by, and that is where man's law does not contradict God's law, that's a good thing. It's okay. But where man's law actually contradicts God's law or God's word, that's where we need to sit down and have a discussion. That's where we need to sit down and have a discussion. And what Peter would say is we ought to obey God rather than man. So if man's laws run counter to God's word and God's law, we need to listen to God's law about these things. Now in this program, we're going to bring up a lot of issues here, and I'm just going to give you a warning to the parents who have kids listening to the program. I'm not going to get graphic or anything, but I'm going to use some terms that they may or may not have known or learned about before. So like homosexuality, I'm certain the kids that listen to my show know what it is. I know they've asked their parents about it because we've talked about it on the show before. But we're going to talk about it in light of ethical humanism versus Christianity, and how the two of them are very different, and how one of them, even the ethical humanists, have changed their stance over the years. However, Christianity and God's word has never changed, and that to me is the most telling thing of the difference between Christianity and humanism. Today's quote meal comes from Max Lucado. "Faith is the conviction that God knows more than we do about this life, and he will get us through it." I remember Lieutenant Matthews. This is one thing, for some reason there's certain quotes I remember and who said them, but I remember Lieutenant Matthews in a sermon one time over in Dunoon, Scotland at the Church of Christ said God never promised to take us out of the storms of life, but he did promise he'd lead us through them. I've never forgotten that. I've never, ever forgotten that. And that's something I share quite frequently with folks when they start talking about the storms of life. Now my short Bible lesson today sort of hits a little close to home here today. It's by Jack Wilkie over at focuspress.org, and he posted this on the 12th of September this year. 4 signs that politics are too important to you. It's not what you think. I've read through these, and I was getting a chuckle out of these because I know some people that take politics to the nth degree. I am a Christian who follows politics because politics do govern a certain portion of my life. And they govern a certain portion of your life. Just like as a Christian, I follow the discipline of Austrian economics because economics has such a huge presence in our lives. And there are some biblical principles that should guide us in our economics. There are biblical principles that should guide us in our politics. And we should never, ever reverse either one of these where economics are informing our Christianity or politics are informing our Christianity, because the day we do that is the day we put God second in our lives. So it's a good read. I encourage you folks to go over and read that. And appreciate everybody on Blog Talk Radio, all the listeners on that, the live downloads, the uploads, and everything like that. The viewership on my videos are starting to climb a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. I'm just waiting for that one, I don't want to say magical, but that one viewer of my YouTube that shares me with their folks on their social media that's going to put me over the edge and really get the ball rolling with this program and everything I'm trying to do and accomplish on here. There's real quick before I get into the show, and this has something to do with the humanism and that. And I won't say the guy's name. One, I don't remember it. It's on my YouTube channel. But he's not a motivational speaker. He's a person that goes around. He's like a troubleshooter for businesses, and especially for leadership and management. He gives these very good principles to go by. And I couldn't help but think, and whether he knows it or not, a lot of these principles that he's espousing are biblical principles of leadership. But he asked this question. He says, a lot of times people founder and just flounder along, just sort of float along, not sure where they're going with their business or anything. And he says, sometimes we get the hart before the horse. We always ask the correct question, well, how are we going to do these things? And what we're trying to accomplish when we're doing something. Like, I'll just take the DanClementShow.com here. I know how I want to go about doing what I want to do, and I know what I want to be about. But the question that I've really sort of skirted around and I won't say never thought about, but I don't think about often enough, is why I want to do what I'm doing. Is why I want to do what I'm doing. And I guess real quick, it goes back to the summer of 2007, before I injured my neck the second time and had to quit driving truck altogether. John McCain and Lindsey Graham were talking up amnesty again. I don't know how many amnesties we've had in the history, since the 1950s, or let's say since World War II, but it's been too many, because they never deal with the fundamental problem of stopping illegal immigration to begin with. If we can stop the illegal immigration and everybody that's here now, I would be more acceptable of amnesty. But doing amnesty with wide open borders the way they are now, and not only those folks coming across the southern border, anybody that comes to the United States and overstays their visa is an illegal immigrant, or illegal alien, I should say. And so I really, past week or so after he talked about this, I really started thinking about, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I've been starting to really formulate this in my mind, and this is something that sort of is the reason why I added that verse. I do what I do there at the Dan Clement Show, knowing the fear of the Lord, I persuade folks of the truth. There was a lot of lies being told by the lamestream media back then. It seemed to me that the only folks that were getting things right were guys like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Michael Savage, some other folks that were on the radio. I'm trying to think. Thomas Sowell, Walter E. Williams had it right on immigration and that kind of stuff. I can't think of I think he's out in Denver, and he's a black guy. I just cannot remember his name. Larry Elder, that's who it is. Larry Elder. He was another one that was getting it right. And I listened to all these guys when I was driving truck, because luckily they're on different times of the day. And what motivated me to get started in this, besides wanting to maybe make a career in online radio and YouTube was that the truth just wasn't getting out there. They were lying. Lindsey Graham and John McCain were lying about amnesty. They weren't being honest with the American people. They weren't being honest with their constituents. And so I've really been thinking a lot about this. This is why, Dan, why did you start this? Why did you do this? Why are you putting yourself through this? And it's mainly because I want to make sure the truth gets out there. The objective, fact-filled truth gets out there. Does that mean I'm perfect in this 100% of the time? No, it doesn't. I'm a man. I'm a human just like anybody else. I have failings. And sometimes I don't see the forest for the trees. But I think more times than not that I do. And when I bring these things forth to you, these articles, and give you my commentary, my Christian political commentary on it, I just offended somebody out there because it's a Christian political, and I've had people tell me that I'm unconstitutional for mixing my Christianity and politics. How dare you? And I'm like, show me the Constitution where that's written. If it's unconstitutional for me to exercise my freedom of speech and tell you exactly what I think. Whether my opinions are fact-based or not, or whether your opinions are fact-based or not, you have that right to put those opinions out in the public discourse, in the marketplace of ideas. However, be forewarned and beware that once you put your opinions out in the marketplace of ideas, then other people have the right to use their freedom of speech to critique those ideas and those opinions that you're putting out in the public discourse, in the marketplace of ideas. And this is one thing that the longer I do this show, and the more I do it, and do my videos and really getting, really doing some good studying on these things, the more I've come to realize that folks that do not like objective, verifiable facts, moralities, whatever, principles that are rooted in a set of ideas and principles, the more that they see that happening, the less they like it. Because, folks, believe it or not, there is a huge divide in America. There is a divide between those who love freedom and liberty and those who hate freedom and liberty. Now, let me deal with those who hate freedom and liberty real quick here in their camp. They don't hate the idea of freedom and liberty for themselves. They don't like the idea of freedom and liberty for the unwashed masses that are out there, that aren't as educated and refined as they are and as worldly as they are. No. The freedom and liberty they like to enjoy is not the same that they want to allow the unwashed masses to enjoy. Now, I'm just the opposite. I love freedom and liberty. And yes, these pointy-head elitists that don't want you to have your freedom and liberty or want to control your freedom and liberty, I agree that they should have freedom and liberty also. But the unwashed masses, I think, have the same amount that they do. No more, no less than they do. And the unwashed masses cannot restrict the freedoms and liberties of the elitist in this country any more than anybody should restrict the freedoms and liberty of the unwashed masses. And that's a huge difference in this country. When I look at things, any more politically, that's how I look at them. Either they're enhancing and safeguarding folks' freedoms and liberties, or they're taking away from them and restricting them. And as an American, we need to decide which camp we're going to be in. And we allow too many things to distract us. We allow way too many things to distract us. I have some articles. I was watching Matt Christensen has a YouTube channel, and he has a commentary show. Be forewarned, there's some colorful language in there every now and then. Anyway, and he doesn't have a GP on his show, at least not that I've noticed anyway. Mine is for general audiences. Mine's family-friendly show, because you're not going to hear me cuss on here. You're not going to hear me berate people and tear people down. I'll tear ideas down, but I'm not going to attack people. Because I think people can be reasoned with, and their ideas and their opinions can be changed with truth and facts if they want them to change. You can't force people to change. But Matt Christensen, so he's in a debate yesterday. I got to watch while I was doing finishing up post-show things, getting things posted on the Dan Clements Show show notes page, things like that, getting a video ready for Patreon. And he was debating this black gentleman who criticized him in a YouTube video talking about how many people died last year at the hands of police, and he kept getting hung up on this percentage of population. And this is one of these arguments that Indivisible Group, Common Cause, that they bring out about capitalism and how bad capitalism is, and how the government should be the one that takes care of everybody's money, give everybody a minimum wage, minimum income is what it is, that everybody should get from the government. But the problem with that is they don't realize where the government gets their money from. They don't just print it, although they can do that, but eventually you print too much money and it's a house of cards to begin with, and it's going to go tumbling down. They need to take real money from the citizens, businesses, import tariffs, excise taxes and stuff like that in order to pay for all this, even though we're still running at right around a $20 trillion deficit, or debt, national debt. Seems to me we're not paying, the government hasn't been paying for everything. And it's not that the people haven't been paying their fair share. I think we pay more than enough in taxes. It's that we have government that's spending too much. But I digress. Let's get back to what I'm talking about here. The idea of freedom and liberty in America should be first and foremost in every American citizen's mind, that I have freedom and liberty, and that freedom and liberty does not allow me to curtail somebody else's freedom and liberties. It just doesn't work that way, and it won't ever work that way, to be honest with you. And if you find somebody that wants to curtail your freedoms and liberties, you need to be careful of those folks. Ethical humanists are these type of people that I have to put in the anti-freedom camps because they want to curtail people's freedoms and liberties at the expense of granting other people what they consider to be freedoms and liberties. Which, look, let's talk about homosexuality real quick here. And this goes right along with what I'm going to talk about here a little bit with these FBI, with what this debate was yesterday. This Mr. Nico was debating Matt, and he was using these percentages and, saying, well, the percentages are all out of whack. Yes, more white people are killed by cops every year, but there's more white people in America than there are black people. And then when Matt tried to bring up the crime statistics, saying that black people commit more crimes than white people, you thought the sky was falling. But the stats are the stats. The facts are the facts. And there's more black people killing black people than there are white people killing black people or police killing black people. I mean, those are just statistical facts. And he wouldn't listen to these things. It didn't matter. And he kept going about it's the percentages. I don't really care about the percentages. I care about the numbers. This is the same argument that these folks in Visible Guide talk about when it comes to taxes. Well, if the multi-billionaires are paying a 15% tax and you're paying a 15% tax, that's not fair. I'm like, what's not fair about it? You make $100,000, you pay $15,000 in taxes a year. If you make $15 billion, or let's say $100 billion, you pay $150 million in taxes. That's the numbers. You don't even come, the $15,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to what a multi-billionaire pays in taxes, number-wise. And this is the argument they get you at. Homosexuality. You would think with the lamestream media and the sycophants in politics and the ethical humanists out there that 50% of the population or more are LGBTQAXRZ. Okay? But that's not the facts. The facts are they make up less than 4% of the population all in toto. And yet we want to govern by these things. I'm not saying we need to abuse. I'm not saying the majority of Americans need to abuse these people and their views. I'm not saying that at all. But to mainstream their views saying that they're normal and that everybody needs to adhere to them isn't right either. And I'm not saying there has to be a happy middle ground, but there has to be some type of objective standard that we can measure this by to see where we're at. And again, I bring up with the homosexuals, I bring up this idea that if you put gay men on an island, you put gay women on another island, and you have there's no way they can artificially inseminate themselves, especially the men. The women at least have a chance to procreate if they could artificially inseminate themselves. But let's say they can't do that. How many generations, if they're not allowed to leave the island, I'm not saying we need to lock all these people up on these islands, this is just a thought exercise. How long would it take for them to die out? How many generations would be on that island? Answer 1, the original generation. That's it. They would die out as soon as the last person died. The reason why I bring this up is that with marriage, this is one of the big bugaboos with ethical humanists, that us Christians want to force our values on everybody. It's not that we want to force our values on everybody. It's that our values actually are rational logic, if you think about it. How do you sustain and grow a civilization or a society? Let's just bring it down to a society. How do you sustain and grow America? Well, you have to have a male and a female somewhere along the line, whether you're artificially inseminating or you're adopting. Somewhere along the line, there had to be a male and a female. I don't think they've artificially created semen yet. So whether it's artificial insemination, that means boys and girls, that means getting mom pregnant with medical instruments, or they do it the old-fashioned way, mom and dad hook up. That's how you grow a society. That's numerically, population, people-wise. In order to have a stable society, and there's plenty of studies out here on this. There's a gentleman over at the Heritage Foundation, Mr. Anderson. He's a PhD. He's done a lot of studying on this. He makes a lot of sense in his arguments. That a healthy society consists of the majority of families being mom and dad. You know, showing the kids this is how moms and dads act. And I'm talking about the mainstream society. Are there deviations from that? Absolutely. And I don't want to use those as examples of being a good family for raising children in. Abusive dad or abusive mom or whatever the case may be. Those, percentage-wise of the whole population, are very low. Okay? So, and I keep telling you, we don't govern by the margins. So what benefit, besides a physical fulfillment between the two that are in the arrangement, what benefit does homosexual marriage have for a healthy society? What does it add to the healthy society? It can't procreate. It can't bring its own progeny into the world. All homosexual couples can do, and we're talking, I got to sort of separate this out. Unless you're two lesbians, they can get artificially inseminated. But again, there had to be a man somewhere along the line to give them the basic ingredients to get pregnant. Okay? But if we didn't have that, let's say we didn't have the science of artificial insemination, it couldn't be done. What would it contribute to a healthy society? Now, you could say that there are good examples of loving people, you know, people loving each other and living in a committed relationship. Okay. But you know what? Me and my wife love each other, and we've been in a committed relationship over 33 years. So what is that any different than me? Why can't you use me as an example also for that? I'm not saying that there aren't homosexual couples out there that are committed and they've been together for a long, long time. I'm not saying that. Okay, that's a benefit. A stable relationship. Stable relationships are a benefit to society. But how do you perpetuate the society? If you cannot procreate, how do you perpetuate the society? And we know through science that there is no gay gene. It's not passed on from parents to children. It's a nurture, not nature thing. So, what is it? Now, like I said, the ethical humanist would tell you that it's through reasoning and life experiences. We'll get into that here in a second. Through reasoning and life experiences that we come up with these ideas. But I just want to go back real quick. And these are, folks, if I can find them and search these things out, you can too. Getting back to this debate with Nico and Matt on YouTube yesterday, and let me make a note, I'll link to that. Link to Nico and Matt. I'm telling me to do this because I's busy with the show and myself could care less what's going on here. But I have a couple articles in the show notes page talking about the fatal force, and I know most of you can't see this as far as for the YouTube channel. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, this is a Washington Post article. There was 963 people who have been shot and killed by police in 2016. To listen to this debate yesterday between Nico and Matt, to hear Nico talk about this, you would think that the police are out there just decimating the black population in this country. And they have some stats down here, 963. Of gender, there's 923 males and 40 females are killed by police officers in 2016. So men far outweigh women in this. Is that fair to men? You know, is that fair to men that that there's 923 men that get killed by police every year? Well, it depends on who you are. If you're a feminist, it's probably a good thing. Race, 400 and, I wish I didn't have it so light here, 466 white people, 233 black, 160 Hispanic, 42 other, and 62 unknown. That's the breakdown with race. Age, under 18, 16, 18 to 29, 295, 33 to 44. I didn't, when I saw this yesterday, I was like, wow. I thought it'd be flopped. I thought the 18 to 29 would be bigger. 393 people, 30 to 34 were killed by police, and 45 and up would be 234, and unknown 25. I don't know where the unknown comes in. Maybe they just didn't know their age or whatever. But as it goes up, it starts to taper back down. But the biggest number is 30 to 44-year-olds at 393. Okay. Let me see here. This body camera, yes, 142 were on. No or unknown, 821. Now, there's a lot of municipalities that do not have, a lot of states that do not have body cam laws. So you just keep going down there. Fleeing the scene, 143 by car, 120 by foot, 51 other, 631 not fleeing, 631 stayed in place, and 18 were unknown. And basically, he was talking about the incidents in Las Vegas with Mr. Bennett, I believe it was, a football player, that he was trying to flee the scene. And they didn't know who he was, and they didn't know if he was involved with what was going on there, the active shooter incident that was going on there. So they wanted to detain him and find out what the story was. And I'm sorry, I don't care what your skin color is, folks. I really don't. You got a big guy like an NFL football player like Mr. Bennett is. Are you going to walk up to him without a gun drawn if you want him to stop and get down so you can search him and question him? Big guy like that can hurt you quick. I mean, it can really hurt you quick. And I'm not saying the police officer is right or wrong. Do not take me the wrong way. I am just saying there was a lot of things that go in together here, but you got guys like this Nico that want to say that the only thing that was on this guy's mind was he's black and he's going to get shot by the cops. And if you take it as raw numbers, he's less likely to get shot by the cops than a white guy is. Number-wise. Now, percentage-wise, yes, differently. But I'm not dealing with percentages, because when you deal with percentages and don't talk about the raw numbers, then things get skewed. It's just like taxes. Things get skewed. So you can go on there and look at these things real quick at the DanClementShow.com. They have those numbers plus the FBI's, let's see here, The FBI releases the 2016 preliminary statistics for law enforcement officers killed. In 2016, there were 66 law enforcement officers who were feloniously killed in the line of duty. And 17 of them were ambushed. 13 were answering disturbances called. 9 were investigating suspicious persons or circumstances. 6 were engaged in tactical situations. 5 were performing investigative activities. 4 were conducting traffic pursuits. 3 were investigating drug-related matters. 3 were victims of unprovoked attacks. 1 was answering a robbery in progress call or pursuing a robbery suspect. And 1 was answering a burglary in process, and 4 were attempting other arrests. I just thought that biggest number up there, 17, were ambushed. I'm thinking of the Dallas police that were ambushed in that attack. That was last year. So, we see here, or was that late 2015? Anyway, I have to dig into those numbers a little bit more there. But 66 law enforcement officers were killed feloniously. That means that a felon was committed in their death, by killing them. It wasn't accidental or anything like that. And that's a pretty significant number of law enforcement that were killed, especially 17 that were ambushed. Ambush means you didn't see it coming. I used to participate in ambushes, setting them up, and also being being at the receiving end of the ambush, not knowing where it was coming from, the sacrificial lamb, as it were, in an ambush. And so you don't know, there's surprises, and you really can't catch up and deal with surprises. So I have some other articles in here talking about Amy Coney, and there's about 4 or 5 articles in there. A lot of these from the Alliance for Justice. They keep saying she said something. They don't cite their sources. They're just saying, well, this is what we heard she said, or this is what she said in this testimony. And one congressional testimony was someplace else, but they don't give you the source to go back and corroborate that. And they do not corroborate that themselves. So you know what I do on this program? If you're not going to corroborate your sources, I can't believe you that they're true. And this is what a lot of folks on, especially the humanist folks on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, this is what they're going with. Well, this person, this Alliance for Justice, they wouldn't lie about this stuff, but they don't give you any sources and anything, and they definitely don't tell you the truth about her in her testimony. And Amy Comey's testimony on Wikipedia. Let me see if I can get it up here. Oh, that's the wrong one. I wanted the other one. Okay. She's supposed to have a meeting. Senate Judiciary Committee was held on September 6th. It's supposed to have been done way back in May or so, but the Democrats have been holding up these nominations. And towards the end of her testimony, and what Dianne Feinstein was using her religion against her, because a religious belief is constitutionally irrelevant to the qualification of federal judgeship, during her hearing, Barrett said it's never appropriate for a judge to impose the judge's personal convictions, whether they arise from faith or any else, on the law. And this is actually out of a Politico article retrieved on, was from September 12, 2017. Senator ask or take fire over questions for Catholic judicial nominee. There's not supposed to be a religious test. And again, remember my scripture. We should obey God rather than man. If man's laws do not contradict God's laws, they're okay. But if man's laws contradict God's laws, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, then they're not okay. Because even our judicial system, folks, is based in biblical law. I'm sorry to tell these humanists that. It's based in biblical principles and biblical laws. So I have her saying this, okay? Then I found there was another, and this is by some of these ethical humanists. They were talking about Catholic judge in capital cases by Amy Coney Barrett and John Garvey. this is just an abstract. The Catholic Church's opposition to the death penalty places Catholic judges in a moral legal bind. While these judges are obliged by oath, professional commitment, and the demands of citizenship to enforce the death penalty, they are also obliged to adhere to their church's teaching on moral matters. Although the legal system has a solution for this dilemma by allowing the recusal of judges whose convictions keep them from doing their job, Catholic judges will want to sit whenever possible without acting immorally. However, litigants and general public are entitled to impartial justice, which may be something a judge who is heedful of and that word, I always stumble over that word, ecclesiastical pronouncements cannot dispense. So talking about their belief system, in other words, that cannot dispense. Therefore, the authors argue we need to know whether judges are legally disqualified from hearing cases that their consciences would let them decide. While mere identification of a judge as Catholic is not sufficient reason for recusal under federal law, the authors suggest that the moral impossibility of enforcing capital punishment in such cases as sentencing, enforcing jury recommendations, and affirming are in fact reason for non-participation. And so this was a thing written back in 1998 by Amy Coney Barrett and also Notre Dame Law School fellow John H. Garvey. And they have, you go up and look, it has the articles here, you can go look these things up. As far as the death penalty cases, as long as it is beyond a reasonable doubt, and I've said this before on the show and I'll say it again, if I was a governor signing death warrants, I would not do so without a thorough investigation that I would have done. I would have a couple in Pennsylvania, I'd have a couple state trooper detectives at my disposal that would work nothing but these cases to make make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and that all witnesses pertinent to it were, had a chance to witness and all that kind of stuff before I would sign the death warrant. If that couldn't be verified, if there was some hanky-panky going on, but we can't go back and retry it, I would commute the sentence to life. Because I want to make sure that that person is 100% guilty of what they're, especially of a capital crime. And I think we need to. If you cannot be 100% sure, then life imprisonment. Just take their liberty and freedom away from them because of their actions and what they did. Now, Ethical Humanist, and I want to get into this here before we get too much further. I was going to show you this video, and I'll save this for tomorrow, about, it was a town hall by, what were these? Town hall protecting our votes from Pence Kobach, Common Cause, and there was a group, this democracy group, and I'll save this for tomorrow, folks, because I think this is important for us to get into, because in the first part of the video, the lady makes the erroneous mistake of calling us a democracy several different times, and even the name of the group has democracy in it. And we have never been, nor were we ever set up as a democracy in this country. We are a republic. Matter of fact, to be more specific, we're a constitutional representative republic. We have a constitution that governs our republic. We don't have a democracy where the mob rules. And that's basic terminology, folks. There's no way they can get around it. They want to try to get around it by saying, well, a republic is a type of democracy. No, it's not. A republic has democratic processes in it, but it is not a type of democracy, never has been. And that's, maybe that's a sticking, maybe that's, I'm splitting hairs there, but I don't think so. Beware the ethical humanist. I'm finally getting to it. 12 basic humanist principles. Now my Facebook antagonists would say there's 8. I'm seeing 12. I've seen actually more. I've seen actually less than 8. But I thought these 12 were representative of what they believe. Let me just read the first part of it here. The fundamental principles of secular humanism have been stated in many ways. In fact, there is no complete agreement on this amongst humanists, and a good part of the humanist debate revolves around the correct enunciation and delineation of humanist principles. The basic principles of secular humanism are set out here as 12 cardinal principles, numbered H1 through H12. They are given below with a few brief comments on each. Now, I'm not going to read all the comments, but I am going to go through and read these principles. H1, the only relevant spheres of actions for are humanity in a collective sense, individual human beings, and the physical environment, nature, in which they operate. Sounds very objective to me, doesn't it, folks? And when I read through these, I want you to put on here, are these subjective or are these objective? And if you need to understand what those words are, please go look them up in the dictionary because you'll remember them longer. Are these principles subjective or are these objective? I want you to make that decision for yourself. 2, human beings are not subject to God or any divine agency. They have no obligation to love, fear, or obey any such supernatural agent. Based on what? Is it subjective or objective? H3, all beliefs must be founded on reason and human experience. Where the progress of knowledge reveals that any belief is or becomes untenable, it should be abandoned. Okay, folks? It should be abandoned. I'm sorry for you guys on the YouTube. I should have been having you follow along on there all along. Okay. Is H3, all beliefs must be founded on reason and human experience. Where the progress of knowledge reveals that any belief is or becomes untenable, it should be abandoned. Subjective or objective? Number 3 is what I have the biggest boogaboo about myself. H4, all human beings are entitled to inalienable human rights, such as those enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We've talked about that before on the show, about the Declaration of a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this is what the UN has adopted. And everything under the sun that somebody wants is a right. Which means ethical humanists don't understand what rights are. They don't understand that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a declaration of human wants and desires. Not necessarily, and even needs, but not necessarily needs. And it has a lot to do with covetousness and envy. Again, H4, is that subjective or objective? H5, these rights inhere to human from the time the human fetus becomes a viable biological entity capable of independent existence without physical or organic dependence on another human being. So what they're saying in H5, real quick here towards the end, just a little commentary here, without physical or organic dependence on another human being, that means that the biological child, the fetus or the child, is not capable of being their own until they're well in their teens. These rights inhere to humans from the time the human fetus becomes a viable biological entity capable of independent existence without physical or organic dependence on another human being. In other words, they have no rights until they become independent and viable outside of physical or organic dependence. Is that subjective or objective? And H5 is where they get their stance on abortion. This is where they think abortion is okay. H6, humans do not have a right of dominion over animals and the environment if it being recognized that humans, along with many other species of animals, do change their environment by their very existence. So H6 says humans do not have the right of dominion over animals and the environment, and it being recognized that humans, along with many other species of animals, do change their environment by their very existence. So we do not have dominion over the world. That means we're not allowed to eat beef and pork and chicken and fish. They're all animals. And whatever other type of protein you want to talk about. We don't have that right, folks. Okay? Subjective or objective? H7, children shall not be subjected to physical or mental abuse, nor to religious or political indoctrination by parents or others. The rights of children should be codified in the Charter of Children's Rights. Now, honestly, I'm going to tell you straight up, I've never read the Charter of Children's Rights. I'm going to have to go back and read that. But children shall not be subject to the physical and mental abuse, nor to religious or political indoctrination by parents or others. Now, age 7, I'm going to say this real quick here, is contradictive, which I give this one to you. This is very subjective. It's okay for the state to indoctrinate the children in politics and religion, saying there is no religion and all these other things. But you as a parent, don't you do it. Don't you dare do that. Age 7 is very subjective and also counterdictive. And folks, when we're talking about these things, especially very subjective things, and they're not based in concrete principles, then the sky's the limit. Whatever you believe is okay. Age 8, civil laws should be arrived at by a collective consensual process and should promote the common good, not the tenets of a particular religion or philosophy. Again, age 8, very, very contradictive. Civil laws should be arrived by a collective consensual process and should promote the common good. Climate change. Well, there's consensus of scientists say it's happening. And yet, the body of proof for these scientists has a lot of erroneous, misleading, fraudulent studies that they base their philosophy on. So it's very, very, very contradictive. A collective consensual process. You know what? Murder's wrong no matter what. Are there some extenuating circumstances like self-defense? Then it's not murder anymore. If you kill somebody in your self-defense, that's not murder. You see what I'm saying here? There is an objective standard you can go by. So H8 is very, very contradictive. Real quick here. Special privileges should not be given to any group on the basis of religious or philosophical belief, nor should any group be discriminated against on the grounds such as race, ethnicity, beliefs, gender, or age. Okay, I don't see a lot wrong with that except the contradictions in it. Age 10, there are no conclusive evidence that that life exists after death, so humans should exert themselves primarily in terms of their present life. Except we have an empty tomb out there, folks. We have an empty tomb out there. Age 11, and I won't go over these completely. I'm running out of time here. The following ethical principles, I guess I'm going to have to, should be generally promoted. Abstaining from conduct injurious to life and the physical well-being of persons, abstaining from the theft of property of others, abstaining from sexual violence and misconduct, abstaining from falsehood, fraud, and deception, abstaining from drunkenness, narcotics, and mind-bending drugs. And then finally, age 12, humanism should develop an attitude of compassion to those in a state of suffering from whatever cause that leads to that suffering and seek to engage in action that alleviates this suffering. We are going to pick up on this tomorrow, folks, because this is very, very important for us to understand all these things. And we'll finish this up first thing on the show tomorrow on Thursday's show. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. And if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow on Thursday's show.